called Save the One. In fact, she told me last night that she's just working on the bylaws for the group. It's a national group, and they've been going for about a year now, but they're still working on their incorporation. That's how new they are. Darlene Pawlik, you can read about her whole little biography in the program journal, which you should all have at your table. I'm sure she'll tell you some of the details. But I met her down at the March for Life. She had Save the One had a booth set up across from the Knights of Columbus booth, which I was at, and we met, and we thought that she'd be a good addition to our program. So with that, I'll have Darlene tell you a little more about her background and what she's done. Welcome.
Everybody, can you all hear me? Yes. Sound a little better than that microphone, do I? Yes. I thought so. My name is Darlene. What's your name? Right. I'm a very informal speaker. I love life. I'm so grateful to be here. And I am so grateful to be here. And I'm going to tell you all about why I'm so grateful to be here. But we have so many heroes in this room, and I just really like to just have you all give each other some accolades right now. So can we just give a hand clap for everybody over here? You guys are awesome. My story is a little bit in the program, but the reason that I'm so glad to be here is because I hear a lot of people say, well, I'm pro-life, except in case of rape or incest or fetal anomaly. And I go, ah. And then some other people will say, well, they have a really bad life, they're abused. And I go, ah, because they're playing God in my mind. They're deciding for themselves how the outcome of that life is going to be and being willing to cut it off before it has a chance to start. I was conceived in a violent rape. My mom was 15 years old. It was her first date, and a charming young man from her school asked her to go to the movies. And on the way home, it started to rain a little bit. It was a little drizzly. And he said, well, let's go through the sand pits. It's a shortcut. And she said, okay. And there he brutalized her. And his thing was to make her as dirty and filthy as he could. And it was so brutal that she didn't tell anybody for 2 years. She didn't tell anybody for 2 years. So she would rather have people think that she had fooled around and gotten pregnant. And so socially, and her very small town, she was sort of pressured into marrying this young man. Well, he brutalized her for another 1.5 years. And when she was pregnant with her second child, after multiple rapes, because they never laid down together, he was a psychopath. He probably still is a psychopath, because he's still out there. She told her mom that if she didn't get her out of there, that she was going to kill herself, and there was no question about it. So she went and lived with her mom. And so she had 2 children from rape. And so you can imagine she had a lot of issues. She had a really hard time with men. She had a really hard time with us. She had a really hard time with life. But she didn't think that the man who brutalized her would abuse babies. So we were sent to my grandmother's house, and he was allowed to brutalize myself and my sister and other children. So not only was I conceived and raped, but then I was abused as a child. And so I felt that my life was worth less than everybody else's, which is really what people are saying when they say a child conceived and raped should be aborted. You should be allowed to kill that child because their life is worth less than everyone else's. Isn't that really what we're saying? So in feeling like I had no value, I allowed men to use me starting at 14 years old. When I was 13, this really buff, bodybuilder guy with jet black hair came over to my neighborhood, and he's sitting in his really nice black Cadillac, and he didn't really approach me so much as my friends, and he'd say, hey, I'm looking for Joe, he's been in this neighborhood, is he around? And he sort of struck up conversation with us, and so over the period of a few months, he drew us into conversation with him and made friends friends with us very slowly. And it really took about 6 or 8 months for us to feel comfortable enough to even get in his car and talk with him, like if it was raining out or whatever. And so that is how traffickers work. So part of the reason I'm here today is to talk about all these different aspects of what come into the pro-life movement. So conceived and rape, trafficking, and then I'm going to talk about forced abortion after that. But one of the things I want you to think about as we're going through our day is to act on everything you hear. My story was not written by me in the beginning. Of course, I write it after. I write it from now on, obviously, and even from about 20 years old when I realized that I could write my own story. But when we act on what we hear, we look at the A first and we apply the things that we hear. So when I'm talking to you, think about what applies to you and what you can apply to your life as you go out. For example, realizing, recognizing, and promoting the fact that every child deserves the right to life, whether they're conceived in rape or incest or any other reason. If that sort of thing applies to you, then use it in your life. And then the next thing is to act. The next letter in ACT is the C. If there's something that we're talking about today, and I'm not just talking about me, we have Ovid Longman-Payne who's going to talk about law, we have a young lady who used to work at Planned Parenthood, and then we have a young lady who's talking about Students for Life today. And all of these speakers are going to have something that you can apply to your life and something that you might change. If they talk about something that you could change in your own life and change the way you do things, the way you think about things, or the way that you project yourself, then apply that also. And the other thing is the T, ACT, teach. What can you transfer to other people? All of us have a circle of influence. Most of the people in here have a large circle of influence. And many of you are on social media. Many of you have large families. You can transfer a lot of this information. When somebody says, well, I'm pro-life except in the case of rape, say, well, I met a young woman who was conceived in rape, and not only is she a pro-life activist, she's got 5 children, 2 grandchildren. So when you talk about killing that baby conceived in rape, you're talking about cutting off a heritage, generations. When my mom conceived me in rape, if she had aborted me, she would have cut off already, only 47 years later, 3 generations. Myself, my daughter, and then my grandchildren. So it's not just that one life that we're talking about. We're talking about a heritage. So as you go through the day today, and each of the speakers you listen to, remember that acronym ACT. Is there something I can apply to my life? Is there something I need to change? And is there something I can transfer to teach to other people? So I told you that I'd talk about forced abortion. That trafficker sold me repeatedly. I was raped and abused. I was kidnapped. I was sold upstate, downstate, in buildings, out of buildings, just everywhere. And when I was 17, I was purchased by one man who kept me in an apartment. And he did tell me that if I stayed with him and I got pregnant, I would have to have an abortion. Yes, ma'am. I sure can. Sorry about that. Dropped my tone, didn't I? I apologize. Thank you for saying something. So when I was 17, the microphone's off. No, the microphone's off. So when I was 17, okay. How's that? Awesome. So when I was 17, I was purchased by one man. He owned a restaurant, and his friend was a sheriff in our town. So the friend rented the rest of the apartment for me. So he was the sheriff in our town, and I was living in an apartment in his name. Did I feel like I had a way out? No, there was no way out for me. I was very trapped. So when this man told me that I had to have an abortion, I fell apart. I was terrified. I was scared. Babies were something I wanted from the time I was a baby. I did not want to have an abortion. But he told me that if I didn't have an abortion, he was going to kill me. One of the men that worked for him that did some bouncing and some roughing up of people that owed him money, because he was also a loan shark, had raped me and kidnapped me and brutalized me. And so I just knew that if I didn't have an abortion, he was going to have me killed, and there was no question in my mind. I threw my hands up in the air and I said, God, I I need you. I need your help here. I have no way to go. I have nowhere to turn. And it occurred to me that I had a social worker that had